Some other examples we could talk about have to do with other virtues like temperance. Someone like Mother Teresa, for instance, felt a calling from God to take a vow of poverty, celibacy, and obedience. Temperance, according to Aristotle, would be enjoying the physical pleasures with the right people at the right time in the right way with the right motivation. The idea that anybody would take even a period of time of their adult lives to deliberately be celibate wouldn't make sense to Aristotle. But from Aquinas' perspective, you might be willing to sacrifice more of those pleasures in order to do the things that you think are really important in light of eternity, in light of the kingdom of God. And this leads to another idea, and that is that for Aquinas, in addition to the shifted mean, the radicalized mean that we're all subject to as Christians, Aquinas believed in the concept of a vocation. A vocation is a calling, a special calling from God for you to do something that goes even beyond the shifted mean, to do something like maybe take a vow of celibacy, or give all your money away and live in a garbage dump and serve the poor. So people can have specific callings on their life, and if you do have a calling according to Aquinas, that is the mean for you, even if it's more radical than the shifted mean that all Christians are called to live in accordance with. The last thing, and this is perhaps one of the most important things about Aquinas and his views on virtue and how it's different from Aristotle, is that Aquinas believes there are three virtues, faith, hope, and love, that are called the theological virtues. These virtues are so important because they come from God. Unlike all the other virtues for which we have to work. Remember, for Aristotle, you've got to study, you've got to surround yourself with mentors, and then you have to practice over and over again in order to become virtuous. Faith, hope, and love don't work that way. Aquinas says these are gifts from God, they're theological virtues, they come from God, they orient our attention to God, and they enable us to participate in the very nature of God. So as we are pursuing the virtues, as we're pursuing generosity and courage and temperance and all of the other virtues, faith, hope, and love enable us to perfectly achieve those virtues. We come to have the very heart of God. Aquinas actually points out something that's interesting, and we'll close with this today. For Aristotle, there are three main kinds of virtue: theoretical wisdom, practical wisdom, and ethike, or moral virtue. Theoretical wisdom is the excellence of our minds in thinking about theoretical matters. Practical wisdom is the excellence of our minds in dealing with practical matters. And then ethike is the excellence of our emotions and our desires and our choices. Well, there's three kinds of virtue for Aristotle, and there are three theological virtues. The theological virtues elevate and perfect each of these kinds of virtue for Aristotle. So for instance, theoretical wisdom helps us to understand what eudaimonia is. Faith helps us have a sure understanding of what ultimate eudaimonia is. Practical wisdom enables us to understand what to do in every given circumstance. Hope gives us the assurance that the ultimate telos is for us, so that we can put in that difficult work of developing practical wisdom. And finally, ethike involves habit, practicing being considerate, practicing being courageous, practicing being generous. The theological virtue of love elevates and perfects ethike, so that while we do that work, God blesses us, and we start to share the very heart of God. So faith, hope, and love are God's gifts to us. While we do the work that Aristotle tells us to do, God elevates and perfects that work through the theological virtues. So in summary, there's three differences between Aquinas and Aristotle on virtue. The first is that the virtues for Aquinas are radicalized, which means that the mean is shifted towards the extremes. So if I am being generous, it might involve giving more. than Aristotle would have us give. With regards to certain bodily pleasures, I might be more careful with those than an Aristotelian would be. With regards to courage, I might take more chances for the good of others, because if I end up dying, that's fine. I still have an opportunity to flourish. The second difference is that for Aquinas, and not for Aristotle, there's this concept of a calling or a vocation that can actually shift the mean even further from the sort of way in which all Christians should be living. And then finally, we've got the concept of, or the virtues of faith, hope, and love. These are gifts from God that enable us to actually, in a perfect way, achieve theoretical wisdom, practical wisdom, and moral virtue. And that's the very encouraging message that we get from Aquinas, is that, yes, we have to take responsibility, but God's going to walk with us, and he's going to give us grace, and he's going to transform us into something we couldn't even imagine if we were to try to grasp it today. And so that's the good news of Aquinas in his teaching on the virtues.